The CNBC app. Global market news in one place. Customizable sections and personalized alerts. Stocks tracking, interactive charts and market insights all in your hands. Stay connected. Stay informed. Download the CNBC app today.
Welcome to Squawk Box Europe. I'm Karen Cho with Steve Sedgwick and Ben Boulos. These are your headlines. Oil prices settle above $100 per barrel for the first time since 2022, as Iran's new Supreme Leader vows to continue fighting and keep the Strait of Hormuz shut.
White House cabinet officials Chris Wright and Scott Bessent say the U.S. Navy is preparing to escort oil tankers through the strait, but can't start just yet.
It'll happen relatively soon, but it can't happen now. We're simply not ready.
As soon as it is militarily possible, the U.S. Navy, perhaps with an international coalition, will be escorting vessels through.
Well, the U.S. looks to ease crude prices by allowing countries to buy Russian oil already in transit and stranded at sea. This as Moscow's UK ambassador tells me the US and allies hold sole responsibility for the crisis and that Russia stands by Iran.
We have a strategic partnership with Iran. We are not allied in military terms, but we have a strategic partnership and we had a lot of communication in different fields.
Equities slump, the dollar rises and yields track higher as the prospect of a prolonged war push up inflation fears, casting a shadow over rate cut expectations for the year.
A very good morning to you. Incredibly busy day, including some UK data, which is slightly on the soft side. Right, crude prices are holding steady in early trade today, but are set to post gains for the week after volatile trading yet again, amid fears of a prolonged disruption in the Strait of Hormuz. Brent closed Thursday's session over $100 per barrel for the first time since August 2022, as traders digested comments from Iran's new Supreme Leader and shrugged off a historic oil release by the IEA. Very easy to do the latter, by the way, and we can talk through the math again if you want. We did this yesterday. The new Supreme Leader of Iran, Mojtaba Khamenei, said the Strait of Hormuz must remain closed as a, quote, tool to pressure the enemy. In his first public statement since being appointed after the killing of his father, Khamenei vowed to continue targeting U.S. bases in the region. Meanwhile, Tehran has started to lay mines in the Strait of Hormuz, according to the New York Times, citing U.S. officials. Top Trump administration officials weighed in on the possibility of U.S. Navy escorting ships through the critical choke point.
It'll happen relatively soon, but it can't happen now. We're simply not ready. All of our military assets right now are focused on destroying Iran's offensive capabilities and the manufacturing industry that supplies their offensive capabilities.
My belief that as soon as it is militarily possible, the U.S. Navy, perhaps with an international coalition, will be escorting vessels through.
Absolutely extraordinary that the US wasn't prepared for the Strait of Hormuz to close, given its military action, given the largest armada of all time, I think it was, that Mr. Trump mentioned a week or so ago. In the past few hours, Dubai's media office says debris from an interception has caused an incident on a building. CNBC has seen images that indicate it is the Dubai Financial Centre. Dan joins us with the latest. Dan, good to see you.
Hi there, Steve. Well, authorities here say debris from a missile interception caused what's being called a minor incident on the facade of a building in central Dubai, and no injuries have been reported. That is the only word we're getting from authorities after this incident, which did appear to take place inside the Dubai International Financial Center. And of course, the context here is that this comes after Iran's threats this week to target financial centers, as well as American and Israeli-linked banks and financial institutions. The DIFC in Dubai is, of course, the center of commerce in this country. Goldman Sachs and Citigroup, for example, have told staff in Dubai to stay away from their offices in the DIFC as we see these Iranian attacks on the Gulf cities continue. We also heard from Standard Chartered earlier this week as well, asking staff in and around Dubai, particularly the Dubai International Financial Centre, to leave their offices, and they've been out working remotely since Wednesday. Overnight, authorities here also confirmed that they intercepted 10 ballistic missiles and 26 drones launched by Iran. That is on Thursday. And what we've also seen here is emergency alerts being issued early this morning as well. I received an alert on my mobile phone shortly after 8 a.m. So the situation here is continuing to evolve. And of course, we have now seen this incident taking place inside the Dubai International Financial Centre. Obviously, a real concern for anyone who lives in and around that area. Meanwhile, what we've also heard is Iran's new Supreme Leader finally breaking his silence as well, but still not being seen in public. Mojtaba Khamenei vowing to keep the Strait of Hormuz closed as a tool, he says, to pressure against the West, and also warning that US military bases in the region would be attacked if they remained open. What's interesting here as well is that his statement directly contradicted the remarks that we heard earlier this week from Iran's president, Masoud Pezeshkian, who suggested that Iran would actually consider ending the war if certain conditions were met. It's part of the reason we've seen oil prices continue to stay elevated. Brent crude, of course, settling above $100 a barrel for the first time since August of 2022, surging about 9% in a single session overnight. And as you've been reporting, the Energy Secretary suggesting that the US Navy is perhaps not ready yet to start escorting ships through the Strait of Hormuz. No real surprises there, given the situation on the ground.
Dan, thank you so much for the update, and stay safe out there. Well, our next guest says Europe is sleepwalking into another energy crisis, which could be worse than the 2022 shock. Joining us now is Dan Lakaya, who is Chief Economist at Tressis. Dan, thank you so much for joining us. I've got to say, I saw your article earlier in the week, and it's framed some of the conversations we've had with those in utilities and trying to manage the supply side. We know that gas is up about 77% so far now year to date, thanks to the conflict. Just explain in your own words what you think Europe is lacking in terms of its approach to shoring up supplies.
Hi, Karen. Yeah, I think that the biggest risk for Europe is that it did not prepare itself for another energy shock in the 2022 crisis. And because it had a very mild winter and the support of LNG coming from the United States, European countries sort of imagined that there would be no problem like the one that they're facing right now. But this one is much worse because on the one hand, you have obviously the threats from Russia saying that they may cut supply of natural gas to the European Union, which continues to import a very elevated level of natural gas from Russia. And additionally, you have diplomatic crisis in Spain with the United States and with Algeria. Additionally, what you have is two very significant different elements this time, is that Qatar and Emirates are under force majeure, which means that most of the flexible cargoes that could go to Europe to guarantee supply of natural gas are going to Asia. And additionally, what we're going to find ourselves is a very challenging environment for the injection period in the European Union. The storage is almost depleted or very, very low levels. And the energy mix in the European Union has not been sorted out, continues to be exceedingly volatile and intermittent. All those elements together, only with a very challenging injection period in spring and summer, may create an energy crisis that will keep power and natural gas prices in the European Union at very high levels, and therefore making industry uncompetitive and citizens suffer in their bills into 2027. Right. And that is the big risk.
Dan, let me just pull out one of those threads. You mentioned the diplomatic row that has been emanating from Spain with Algeria, but also with the United States. I think the interpretation as we look at the pushback from the Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez to the conflict is that he's taking a very strong line here. Are you saying this could be negative to the supply coming into Europe from the American source because of this diplomatic threat that the Spanish are posing?
If you think about it, Spain is a very significant hub of entry of liquefied natural gas into Europe. It has the largest number of regasification terminals, and it's a very important hub in order to provide stability in supply of natural gas when there are disruptions, either coming from Russia or from Qatar. But the challenge here is whether the threats and the diplomatic crisis reaches independent and private companies, and they, the suppliers of natural gas, decide to sell that natural gas elsewhere. Because for the situation that we have right now, and for the time being, for any exporter of liquefied natural gas in the United States, the levels of demand are plentiful. They can sell anywhere and probably at much higher prices. That is the problem. It's not just a problem of risk of supply. It is certainly at best a problem of elevated prices for a longer period.
Dan, lovely to see you, and it's fascinating to listen to you and Karen speaking there. But look, Europe isn't sleepwalking into this. Europe knows exactly its problem. Europe has an enormous problem that it doesn't have the basic resources, the hydrocarbons, the molecules it needs to fuel its economy. That is a fact. Europe can't do much about that apart from diversify resources, which it has aggressively been doing so since the start of the Ukraine war. It is diversified enormously away from Russian product. By the way, I agree with you entirely about the LNG it's still getting from Russia, which is promised to stop doing by 2027. But you're absolutely right. At the moment, there is a degree of hypocrisy there, and I've documented this many times. But Europe has to get its resources from somewhere. It thought it could get it from the Middle East as an offset to Russia. It thought it could get it from the United States as an offset for Russia. I actually think, and I can't believe I'm doing this, I think Europe is doing a lot to diversify resources and, of course, to use electrons rather than molecules, more than most regions in the world as well. I just think it's a crisis that Europe has to overcome rather than ignore, and I don't believe they are ignoring it.
Oh, well, I'm glad, Steve, and probably so. I think that the biggest problem is that they bet on a very mild winter again. And if you make the maths of supply and demand into the European Union, you will see then that if they are taking decisive action, which I hope is correct, then it's going to be a problem of price, certainly. And that is the issue. The issue is that if it's not a supply crisis, which obviously with all of the elements that are being played right now is a challenge, then it's certainly going to be a price issue. Therefore, what I would have welcomed in the period between 2022 to 2026 was that the European Union had taken action in terms of supply in nuclear.
Dan, come on. It's all very easy to... I do it as well. I hold my hands up, looking smart after the fact. But the fact of the matter is, you know as well as I do, every single piece of independent analysis on the planet expected a supply glut of LNG to come on board in 2026 and 2027. It was a very solid bet before America and Israel started a war with Iran that there would be plentiful supply from the US, from the Middle East, from North Atlantic, from Eastern Mediterranean. It was a fair bet that there was a vast glut, an outsupply of product coming onto the market in 2026. We can all look smart after the event, Dan.
No, but I 100%. I 100% agree with the idea that there was a very high risk of oversupply and continues to be plenty of supply. LNG, not so much. We all agree that there was a big problem of oversupply in oil, and but not so much in LNG. In any case, when you have oversupply and low prices, it's a great time to advance the injection period. That is something that we have done in Europe for many years, many times. Unfortunately, since 2022, we have grown accustomed to the biggest stimulus that the European Union has seen since 2022 has not been the European Union Next Generation Fund, has been low gas and oil prices, which is fine, but just accelerate and start building resources earlier, knowing that you're purchasing them cheap. That's not that I think that we agree on everything, Steve, is that what we're saying is that it would have been a phenomenal opportunity this winter that instead of drawing down from the storage levels, they would have taken action to reach long-term agreements. And you and I know that long-term agreements in LNG in Europe have been reduced. They were betting more on spot LNG. And that is a certainly challenging problem. Why? Because they expected that the glut would bring prices down further. Instead of accepting that those prices that they were seeing were very good, let's build injection, they reduced long-term contracts, increased the dependency on short-term contracts. That's it. It's simply a strategy that should have been implemented, and that now, with this challenge, is going to cost us. By the way, this challenge was not coming only from the war. At the beginning of the year, they were shrugging off the idea that gas prices were rising, because oil and gas prices were already rising before the war. They were shrugging them off as a purely issue of climate and as purely issue of a severe winter. And that is, again, something that you could have taken an opportunity to take long-term contracts further. That's it.
Dan, I love our conversations. I genuinely do. But I'll just say one more. I've got to let it go, okay? But
Absolutely.
They were rising before the war because two ruddy, great aircraft carriers were going to the Gulf and people anticipated a war. Not for any other demand reason, Dan.
No, but come on, Steve, happy to take that comment entirely. I am 100% with you, Steve. What happened was that into winter last year, they were depleting storage levels. Into winter last year, they were betting higher on short-term LNG contracts and not only letting some of the long-term contracts go, but betting that there would be a significant glut in 2026, which is fine. But they could have done something to restore storage.
I wanted to give you the last word. I've given you the last word. Lovely to see you, my friend. We love the conversation. In fact, so much so that poor Ben didn't even get a question. But thank you so much. That's happening a lot to him, bless him. Dan Lacaille, who is Chief Economist at Treasury. Thank you. It's a brilliant debate, and I absolutely adore it, as does Karen and Ben. Thank you.
Yes, I am still here, and still to come on the show, the US government issues a 30-day waiver to allow countries to buy Russian oil. We'll discuss that in more detail for you after the break. Plus, Deutsche Bank shares decline after the lender flagged a $30 billion exposure to private credit. We'll take a closer look at the jitters in the private market space later this hour. And don't miss our interview with the CEO of Enquest. That's coming up at 7:45 London time.
Executive Decisions is the new podcast from CNBC, where I ask powerful leaders about their decisions that changed everything. I'm Steve Sedgwick. Here's the CEO of the London Stock Exchange Group, Julia Hoggett.
There is no justification whatsoever for not doing the right thing, even if the right thing is hard to do. Which also means that if the context changes or the information changes, it is absolutely fine to also change your mind.
That's Executive Decisions with me, Steve Sedgwick. Get it wherever you're listening to this.
Let's take a look at the markets so far this week. And yesterday, another pullback stateside over the course of the week. Probably no surprise that we're also trading in the red. The extent of the selling, 1.7% on the Dow this week. A little bit less off the Nasdaq, so it's been more contained as we've watched the conflict play out, down to the tune of about 1/3% for the trading week. But the bumpy path investors have had, hoping that we might be getting a timeline where we're near completion around the conflict in Iran, only for attacks to step up and the Strait of Hormuz to remain shut. So the markets have weathered a few twists and turns on the story. And the reality is it's been risk-off still in many quarters of the markets. I want to take you to Asia to see how that Friday session is playing out. And this morning we've been watching an attack around the financial centre in Dubai. Again, the optics here around the safety of those Gulf states and what it could mean in terms of the medium long-term ramifications. The market's still looking very closely at this, and you can see Asian markets today are down more than 1% off Japanese stocks, along with Hong Kong down 1%, 0.8 in the red for the Chinese stock market, 1.7 down for the Kospi. In some ways, these two boards, the Japanese stock market, South Korea, have become markers for risk on, risk off, and today firmly risk off day as we look to wrap up the trading week. I want to take you to European futures, and just by comparison, over the course of the week, we have been a little bit more resilient here in Europe. We've been flat. That's about the best of it on the stock 600. No progress in either direction. The early signals this morning, though, are weaker again. It does suggest on the back of some selling action yesterday that we will continue to see a little bit more red this morning. We're seeing down about 0.5% on DAX futures.
Yeah, look, there's so many other things to talk about, but I've seen it so many places. This is binary. This is about the war. If the oil price carries on going up, there are incredible fears about the global economy, about inflation, about all of the above as well, and about interest rates, of course. The US government has issued a 30-day sanctions waiver to allow countries to buy Russian oil and petroleum products that are stranded at sea. To be honest, I've got a feeling the Indians were still buying it anyway, but I don't think they'd stop buying it, the Indian refiners. Anyway, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent described the move as short-term and narrowly tailored and said it would not provide significant financial benefit to the Russian government. Well, I sat down with the Russian ambassador to the UK yesterday. It's my first time on sovereign Russian territory since the start of the war. As you know, I was a fairly frequent visitor to Russia before 2022, certainly before 2014. And I spoke to the ambassador, Andrey Kelin, in the ambassador's residence and asked him whether Russia is an ally of Iran as the war in the Middle East continues.
We have a lot of sympathy with Iran. We have a lot of sympathy as well with the Persian Gulf states. It is no doubt at all. As for the beginning, I cannot understand the position when everybody blaming Iran and forgetting about who has originated the crisis, because crisis has started with as I have said, with Israel and U.S. aggression against Iran. And it was in the middle of talks, of course, and we have evidences provided also by the Minister of Foreign Affairs from Oman, who mediated these talks, that there were some successes and successful movement in these talks. So they may continue. And at the moment, yes, as you have noticed, we discussed, my president discussed this issue with the President of the United States, and we can make a good contribution, by the way, to finish it, to wrap it up.
Iran had been enriching uranium way beyond the levels necessary for civilian uses. Isn't that the root of the cause, this conflict? Iran has a position. It needs a complete cycle of enrichment of uranium, and it sticks to it. It has many times declared and stated, the leader of it has stated that they do not want to acquire nuclear weapon at all. This is not all simply policy. It's a policy, a very certain policy. It's not about nuclear weapon that they would like to have. They need a full-scale circle of enrichment. That's the goal. And this is now one of the conditions that Iran put forward in order to stop shelling, in order to come back to negotiate a solution. But there is a school of thought that said Iran did want nuclear weapons because they would see that as insulating them against US and Israeli attacks in a way that North Korea feels that it's insulated against attacks because it has a nuclear weapon.
What I can do about it is just nothing. There is a school of thinking, so there are different schools of thinking in it, but we listen to what Iran authorities are saying about it.
It was Foreign Minister Molotov who said that Russia, or the Soviet Union as it was, is not indifferent to the fate of Iran. 21st century Russia is not indifferent to the fate of Iran. Is Russia supporting Iran?
Well, it's very good that you are referring to some of our Minister of Foreign Affairs. I appreciate it. But anyway, of course, as I have said, we have a strategic partnership with Iran. We are not allied in military terms, but we have a strategic partnership, and we had a lot of communication in different fields. As I understand, we have daily contacts right now with Iran in different fields, and we have lots of people who are traveling between Russia and Iran and so on. So many links are connecting us with Iran.
Do you have any military links with Iran at the moment?
I do not comment on that side.
Is Russia providing intelligence to Iran for targeting US assets in the Middle East?
I'm only a civilian ambassador, diplomat here, so I do not have any knowledge about military links or providing intelligence information.
But so you are a representative of the Russian government as well, and the accusation is that Russia has been supplying intelligence to Iran to target US assets, US radar capabilities in the Middle East as well.
What kind of accusation it is? I do not accept any accusation. United States is providing intelligence to Ukraine. Ukraine and United Kingdom is providing. Ukraine is striking civilian targets in Russia. The day before yesterday, they have killed a lot of civilians with British Storm Shadow missiles that has been provided by Britain. 7 people or 8 people has been killed, civilians in Bryansk, 40 injured, 40 civilian houses damaged, and all of this with British weapon and with provision of intelligence by United States and Ukraine and United Kingdom.
That was His Excellency Andrey Kelin, who is the UK ambassador to the Russian ambassador to the United Kingdom. Look, we had a long conversation. We went back and forth on a lot of issues. I'm going to say this. He and his staff were incredibly amenable. They were very polite. They were very generous with their time. They helped us out with setting up the OB and what have you. But the fact of the matter is, I was speaking one language. The Russians were speaking a completely different. And we were both speaking English, but it was like on every single issue. On Iran, it was US and Israeli thought as well. On are you supporting them as well? Obviously, obfuscating there as well. On Ukraine, it's all the West's fault. It's all the Ukraine's fault. It's all the EU's fault. It's Sir Keir Starmer's fault for not wanting diplomacy. That came up quite a lot as well. So I stuck to, I think, some very solid, fair questions. He stuck to the line. And it really worries me. Look, here we are in year 4 of the Russia-Ukraine crisis. And still there is this, cognitive dissonance. There is this thought process that it is all down to Ukraine. It is all Zelensky's fault. It is the problem of the West and their aspirations towards Ukraine that started this crisis in 2014. I said to him, but you broke the Budapest Memorandum in 1994. You invaded Kyiv. You know, Crimea. I was in Kyiv the second the Little Green Men were there in Crimea. I was there in 2014. And yet there is still this different language we're speaking. And that really worries me about diplomacy.
Yeah, no doubt the Russians doing better on the back of this conflict now too. Selling oil, selling it at a higher price.
I'll just say, I don't know if it's changed anything, because I think a lot of those buyers of Russian product were still buying Russian product.
Yeah, but at a higher price now, because there's no discount around the sanctions.